Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. Just a little note, I have a subscription service available for this podcast series. You're able to get the episodes released to you a week prior, and you also get access to bonus episodes. There are currently 23 bonus episodes available for you, and they are exclusively only to subscribers. For only the price of a coffee a month, you can sign up. Some of the bonus episodes: there is one on Alphaeus Barrington's son, Jack Barrington, who was a mystery to me largely, and I uncovered some really interesting information about him. He was a professional whistler who travelled around South Australia, Victoria and New South Wales. There's also an extra episode to The Tracker, where it talks about the ladies from Warringah's mission and uncovers some interesting information about the Aboriginal ladies that came from that area and the links to episodes. I've also got Ray Blair's extra to her episodes on Theo's duty. And I've also got some follow-up episodes related to the Deniliquin bank robbery, Harry Power and his family in Australia, the bushranger Frank Gardner, his family as well, are covered in a bonus episode. So I would appreciate it if you would consider assisting me in my research in the time that it takes and sign up to subscribe. I also have a Facebook page, so when you're listening to the stories, tune into the Facebook page, Family History Mysteries, as I add photos and documents and other pictures that relate to the person so you can put a face to the name as you're listening to the podcast. Episode 116, Pilot Michael Dicken. Michael Perry Stowell Dicken was born in Cairo on the 5th of July 1923 and was baptised by the Bishop of Egypt and the Sudan at St Mary's Church in Cairo during the unrest in Morocco and the war in North Africa. He was the son of Charles Vernon Dicken, CBE of British War Service, and Alice Mary Ogden of Patalia, India. His father was educated at Cambridge and Pembroke College. Charles was the son and heir of Charles Gauntlet Dicken, Captain, later Admiral of the Royal Navy. Charles Dicken was a Commodore in charge at Hong Kong on the HMS Tamar from 1904 to 1905 during the Russo-Japanese War. Charles Dicken received a Bachelor of Arts in 1903 and a Master of Arts in 1907. He then commenced Egyptian civil service in 1906 and continued this until 1924. He was Controller General of Administration and Pensions, a Ministry of Finance in Cairo from 1923 to 1924. He was Commander Order of the Nile and Commander of the British Empire in 1927. He was the financial expert at the Four Power Conference on the Tangier question in Paris in 1928, the Assistant Administrator and Director of Finance in the Tangier Zone in Morocco from 1924 to 1937, and the Minister of Finance at Patiala State, India, 1937 to 1941. Michael's father died in Morocco in 1955. His mother, Alice Mary Ogden, was born in India. She married Charles Dicken on the 6th of September 1917 in Cairo. Alice wrote under the pseudonym of Thora Stowell. Her mother was Emily Mary Stowell, so she took on her maiden name. She was a poet and a children's author. She also wrote a book on Anglo-Egyptian cookery and the Book of Animal Life, The Scarlet Flute, The Big Book for Girls and Red Candles in Spain. Some of her poetry was even put into music. Alice died in 1977 in Hove, Sussex, England, aged 88. Michael Dicken had a sister, Christiana Susan Elizabeth Dicken, who was born 5 years prior to Michael on the 26th of August 1918 in Calcutta, India. Christiana married Eric Edmund Levesley, an engineer, in 1943 in Middlesex, England. They had a daughter, Margaret, in 1944. Christiana died on the 5th of January 1985 in Brighton, Sussex, England. Michael was raised in Morocco, and at the age of 10 he went to Normandale School, Bexhill-on-Sea, England, coming out to his father's house at Tangier for all of his holidays. In January 1937, while on holiday, he went for a week's cruise on the HMS Hood by invitation of Admiral Blake, transferring to the HMS Sussex with Admiral Kennedy Purvis, in both cases living in the gunroom. While on board the Sussex, an SOS was received from a British ship attacked by Spanish warships. This was during the Spanish Civil War. She turned to the rescue with the crew at action stations, and Michael was in the fore turret. When they got within range, the Spaniards made off, so there was no battle, but it was quite an experience for a boy of 13. That same year he went to his father's old school, Cheltenham College at Newark House, and in 1939, on the outbreak of the war, Cheltenham was evacuated to Shrewsbury, so he returned for a few months with his parents to India, where his father at the time was post of the Minister of Finance to the Maharaja of Batalia. In the spring of 1940, he left India by aeroplane for Australia and entered Melbourne Grammar School. Melbourne Grammar School's records of Michael state that he was admitted to the senior school in 1940 and left in 1941. He was in the school boarding house, the house rowing team, and played his violin for the school play in May 1941 for the Pirates of Penzance. He'd always set his heart on flying, and in 1942 he fulfilled his life ambition by joining the Royal Australian Air Force on the 14th of July when he was 19. He went to Deniliquin in southern New South Wales to train, and he rose rapidly by stages from ground staff to pilot, to fighter pilot and pilot officer. And it was there that he met a young Joan Gooch, and they became sweethearts. Michael told Joan of his childhood and how arum lilies grow wild in Africa, and he told Joan that if he died in combat, to plant an arum lily in his memory. He gained his commission and wings after graduating from the 7 SFTS in Deniliquin, and he was posted to No. 2 Officer Training Flight Unit at Mildura in the No. 23 Fighter Operational Training Course. On the 17th of August 1943, Michael, as pupil pilot, and flying officer Thomas Philip Bauer, the staff flying instructor, were both aboard Wirraway A2545 when Dicken was taking instruction as part of the No. 23 Fighter Operational Training Course, carrying out section combat exercises. The Wirraway was seen by other crew in the exercise to pull suddenly out of a steep dive at low altitude and see one of its wings part company from the aircraft. This then followed into an unrecoverable dive into the ground. This ejected both pilots from the fuselage, and tragically both pilots sustained fatal injuries instantly. Michael was one of 52 young men who died in training in Mildura, and he was about to be made an instructor when he met his death. Michael was well over 6 foot, broad-shouldered and upright, of high ideals and a quiet and unassuming nature. He was a brilliant musician. He played both violin and piano, and perhaps from his mother, he inherited a gift for writing, and even when a schoolboy, he had many stories published in boys' papers with his own illustrations, being very clever with his pencil. The Melbourne Grammar School had an obituary for him. Michael Perry Stowell Dicken was killed in a flying accident on August the 20th, 1943, shortly after he gained his wings in the RAAF. He was at Cheltenham College, England, and on a visit to Australia when the war broke out, he finished his education with us. His aim was to enter the diplomatic service, and he was a keen student of languages, including Spanish. He was also a great lover of music and played violin in the school orchestra. Although intended for a university course, he considered that his duty was to enter the services, and he'd always been interested in flying, and decided on the RAAF, which he joined on leaving school. He was the son of C. Vernon Dicken, CBE, of Batalia, India. And Michael is commemorated in the Roll of Honour in Tangier, Morocco, and he also is on panel 112 in the commemorative area of the Australian War Memorial. His grave is at Mildura Public Cemetery, and his gravestone is inscribed, No. 419115 Pilot Officer, MPS Dicken, Royal Australian Air Force, 17th of August 1943, age 20, to live in hearts we leave behind is not to die. And I'll post photos of Michael on my Facebook page, and you can really see how young he was at the time of his enlistment. On the 17th of August 2004, at a spot nearest the crash site, a memorial plaque was erected. Joan Gooch, who was now Joan Ward, was in attendance 61 years later, and Joan planted an arum lily at the memorial. Joan Lawson Gooch was born in Deniliquin on the 27th of August 1925. She was the daughter of William Gooch and Christina Eileen Lawson. William Gooch was born in Mildura, Victoria on the 29th of May 1884. His parents were English, James Richmond Gooch and Emma Hollis, and William was the youngest child of 7. Emma arrived in Melbourne on the 19th of March 1857 at the age of 17 on the Sardinian from Liverpool, and his parents married in Bendigo on the 16th of April 1860. On the 24th of August 1864, it says 3 mates, Joseph Cairns, James Gooch and Emma Crossan, were prospectors and found indications of gold through a fine reef of rubbly stone to the depth of 132 feet in one shaft, while cross drives proved its thickness to be upwards of 30 feet. Other shafts were sunk, but none of them was gold sufficient to pay for crushing. The funds of the company ran short, and they were obliged to leave the ground till they had replenished, when they tried again. This occurred several times, but up to a few weeks ago the claim never paid, though patches of 6 ounces to the ton were obtained. Rather than lose the money and labours spent on the claim, it was let to 2 tributors, hard-working and experienced quartz miners, and singular to say, they had not been at work a fortnight before the remunerative quartz at 50 foot from the surface was discovered. So unfortunately for James Richmond Gooch, he narrowly missed a windfall in that mine. His son William Gooch was featured in the Pastoral Times, Deniliquin newspaper, on the 26th of October 1912. It says alleged assault, cases dismissed. On Thursday at the police court, 3 summons cases arised out of an alleged assault which occurred on Sunday afternoon last on a farm 12 miles from town. Alfred Dean Watson versus William Gooch. The complainant charged the defendant with unlawful assault and sought an order against Gooch to keep the peace towards him. All 3 cases were heard together. In the assault cases, each party pleaded not guilty, and in the third case, Gooch pleaded cause to show. A.D. Watson, a farmer, stated, "My property adjoins that of J. Lawson, for whom the defendant works. On Sunday last I was walking in my crop paddock and saw the defendant in Lawson's paddock. He said, 'Good day,' to me, and I replied. Gooch left his bicycle against the fence and said, 'What's all these lies you've told about me?' I said, 'I am telling no lies about you.' He then grabbed me by the hand and hit me on the forehead and knocked me down. He hit me on the eye when I was getting up, then doubled me up and knelt on me, saying, 'I'll break every bone in your body.' I said, 'What's it about? Give me a chance.' Gooch said, 'You went and told the police I stole your tools.' I said, 'I did nothing of the sort. When you worked for me, we were good friends, and I've never told anyone anything untrue about you.' He then let me up. I started to walk away and said, 'You are the last man in the world I thought would treat me like this, and I'll try to get other protection.' He said, 'I suppose you mean to summons me?' And I said, 'Yes.' He then ran after me and threw me down again and said, 'You'll never move from this spot unless you give me your word there will be no more about this.' He was kneeling on me then and had his hand on my throat. I said, 'If you don't hit me anymore, I'll let this pass.' When I got up, I saw Lawson on the road about 5 chains away. Lawson turned his back to us and I walked towards him, and I said to Lawson, 'Did you send this man to knock me about?' He said, 'No. What do you always tax me with everything for?' I said, 'I'll expect you to speak the truth and say what you have seen.' Gooch said, 'If there is any more about it, I will put a hole through you, I will. I have not given you enough.' He put his bicycle against the fence and picked up a stick, and he said, 'Here, put down that stick,' and picked up 2 clods of earth and said, 'I'll drop you.' I then went home. The blow from Gooch gave me great pain. My head ached terribly the next day, and I consulted Dr. Hosking, and he prescribed for me. The marks I now have were caused by the assault. I do not know why Gooch should bear a grudge against me. I lose my temper sometimes, but not frequently. I have not had any court cases in the last 2 or 3 years. I had a case with Lawson, but that was settled. I had a row with Muirhead over 3 years ago. I did not threaten to shoot him. The case was dismissed. I did not say to Gooch that he was the means of giving me away to the police or accuse him of stealing some tools. When he worked for him, I told him to put a false bottom in a forge he built. I did not subpoena Lawson to give evidence. I never accused Lawson of anything, and he did not accuse me of anything. I never said to Gooch, 'I'll put a bullet through you.' William Gooch, farm employee, stated, "On Sunday afternoon I was riding my bicycle along the fence and saw a defendant coming down the road near his fence with a stick on his shoulder, 4 or 5 long and a couple of inches thick. He said, 'Good day,' and I answered and got off my bicycle. He said, 'You are the man who put me away with the opium. You knew I was dealing in it and knew the plant.' I said I did not, and he said, 'You are a liar, you did.' He made towards me and lifted the stick to hit me. I got the stick and threw it away, and there was a struggle, and then I got on the bicycle and went away. He accused me of taking his tools. When I was in his employ, I built a forge for him when he went to Melbourne. He said, 'I want a false bottom in it for opium so the police can't find it.' When he came back, he said, 'I won't want it for a while now as I got caught.' The stick Watson had scratched his face in the struggle. I did not bear any conversation with him and Lawson. I did not catch hold of his hands or knock him down. When we struggled, we both fell. I think I knelt on him. I did not threaten to put a bullet through him, but he threatened to put a bullet through me. He told me before that if anybody did him an injury, he would put a bullet through him. I have not borne any spite against Watson and have no grudge against him. I have no intention of injuring him. Lawson's and Watson's fences are adjoining. I dropped the bicycle at my side when the tussle took place." The case was dismissed. What we can glean from this is that William Gooch was the employee of his future father-in-law by the looks of it. And in the Pastoral Times on the 7th of March 1914, so 2 years later, alleged stealing, case dismissed. At the police court on Thursday, before Mr Scott, William Gooch, labourer, was charged with the alleged stealing of a whip, the property of John Mills, the whip at that time being in the possession of Alfred Dean Watson. So they're at it again. The defendant pleaded not guilty. Alfred Dean Watson said that he was a farmer residing at Somerleyton on the Tocumwell Road. He knew the accused. On the 31st of January last, he was in Deniliquin and left for home at about 8 o'clock. On the road home, about 5 miles along the Tocumwell Road, a man rode up on a bicycle. He did not know who it was at the time. He asked me for a lift. The witness refused as the horse and sulky were not his property. He drove on and the man followed on the bicycle. He came up again and asked for a lift, and he said he was knocked up after having ridden 50 miles. He said that he would go along to Tupple that night. Witness told him he couldn't help him and drove off. He still followed close behind the sulky and kept asking for a lift and was refused. At about the 9 Mile peg, he rode up alongside again. He thought he recognised the man as soon as he came up. He said, "For God's sake, let us up, old chap, I'm nearly done." Witness said, "I can't help. This is a borrowed horse and sulky." The witness then got frightened and said, "What do you want to go to Tupple for? Do you know anybody there?" He said no, but he wanted to get there badly. He said he came from Melbourne that day. Witness asked why he had not gone via Tocumwell then, as it was cheaper. He said that this was the way people told him to come. He kept driving along and the man kept asking him for a ride. At this time he was very frightened and suspicious and said, "Why did you go to Deniliquin when you had to go to Tupple?" He said he had no money. He then advised him to go to Mundywar, and he replied that he did not know where it was. He asked how much further he had to go and was told it was only a few miles further on. Witness told him he wanted to camp for the night and that there was a tank close by. He said he didn't want to camp but asked if he could stop at Witness's place for a night, and he said no. He then started to drive quickly to get away from him. He drove as fast as the horse could trot and took the roughest part of the track. He was quickly up to him again. Just after going off the end of the embankment, the whip jerked it out of his hand. He pulled up to get it, and the man said, "I beg your pardon, old man." Witness said, "What are you up to?" And he hit me over the head with the whip. He saw who it was then and tried to get away, but he followed close up, hitting Witness with the whip all the time. He said, I'll flog you to death." After making a circle of about 40 yards, the horse turned around in the direction of home and Witness galloped away. He never saw the whip since. He was sure that it was the accused, although he kept his head down at the time. The accused was working at Mr. Lawson's Bluebell Farm, which was about a mile away. He made the complaint to the police the next day. He had known the accused for 5 or 6 years and had once been for 8 or 9 months in his employ about 3 years ago. He had occasionally seen him since, but had always avoided him when he could. When he first came up, the witness recognised him by his build. He did not see the accused's face, but recognised his voice during the conversation. He had a previous case of assault against the accused, but it was dismissed. He had been convicted for trafficking in opium and accused was a witness against him. He had never threatened Gooch nor spoken to him. He was good friends with all neighbours, except one. He knew a man named Shaw who had also assaulted him. He had been twice assaulted, but the accused men had never been convicted. Gooch was working for Mr. Lawson, with whom he was not friendly. He was good friends with the accused until he went to work for Lawson. There was no reason why he should assault him. Constable Dugan said that on the 4th of February he went to Mr. Lawson's farm and had a conversation with him. He did not see the accused. He made inquiries about him. He picked up a portion of the whip, 15 or 20 chains from the 11-mile peg from Deniliquin, and brought the whip to the police station. Constable Johnson stated that on the 2nd of March he received instructions to go and make inquiries. He was accompanied by Tracker Murphy. He travelled along the Tokemore Road. At about the 10-mile peg, saw the sulky track. There was a bicycle track running along behind the sulky track. He saw where the sulky tracks had circled around, the bicycle following. The sulky tracks ran onto the opposite side of the road. The sulky tracks then went over the culvert, and the bicycle tracks, after crossing the culvert, went towards Mr. James Lawson's gate. He followed the bicycle tracks down to the accused's room. They were very plain tracks. There were other bicycle tracks on the same road, but not running between the sulky wheel marks. He saw Mr. Lawson and went down to the paddock and saw the accused. He asked him if he was in town on Saturday, and he said he had. Witness asked him what time he left to go home, and he said about 7:30 and arrived home at 9:30 p.m. He said he had not seen Watson in Deniliquin that day. Witness said Mr. Watson had accused him of assaulting him near the 10-mile peg. He said he knew nothing about it and he had not seen Mr. Watson for the past 2 months. He said he rode in on Friday and returned on Saturday. Witness told him about the tracks and he said they were not his. Tracker Murphy found the tracks and pointed them out. The tracks at the spot mentioned circled road, but not as much as 40 yards. The PM said he could not see any evidence whatsoever as to stealing. Plaintiff had not said that the whip was taken from him. He said he had jerked it out of his hand. The whip, in fact, had been found at the spot where the alleged assault was said to have taken place. It had not been taken away, so he could not find no justification for the charge of stealing, and he would therefore dismiss the case. It was announced on the 21st of January 1922 that William Gooch was giving up farming and leaving the district and was selling by public auction his farming outfit. And William Gooch married Christina Eileen Lawson on the 24th of April 1922. They had 3 daughters. Christina had been born in Echuca on the 21st of April 1896 and was 12 years younger than William, and Christina was the daughter of James Bell Lawson, as mentioned earlier, and Mary Beattie. On the 12th of August 1932, it says an examination in connection with the bankrupt estate of William Gooch, farmer of North Deniliquin, was conducted yesterday. In the Deniliquin Pastoral Times on the 21st of March 1944, there was an article titled 2 Stealing Charges, Defendant Released on Bond. Today, at the police court, William Gooch, on remand, was charged with stealing £12, 19 shillings, the property of Deniliquin Butter Factory, and there was a second charge of stealing £25 belonging to the same company. After evidence was taken, the defendant elected to be dealt with summarily and pleaded guilty to both charges. On the first charge, Gooch was sentenced to 3 months' imprisonment to be suspended on entering into a recognisance of £20 and surety of £20 to be of good behaviour for 12 months. On the second charge, the sentence was 6 months to be suspended on entering into a recognisance of £50 and a surety of a similar amount to be of good behaviour for 12 months. Detective Murphy, now stationed in Sydney, said that on the 18th of January, Mr. Pears, the manager of the butter factory, saw him and gave him certain instructions. On the 22nd of January, he saw Pears and accompanied him to the defendant's residence where he had a conversation with Gooch. He told him that certain money was missing from the factory and that Gooch was there about the time it was missed. He was asked, "Do you know anything about it?" And Gooch replied, "No. Why do you accuse me, an honest man, of stealing?" And he said, "I am accusing you of nothing. I am asking you if you know anything about it." Gooch said, "I never touched it." Further question, the defendant took £1 from his pocket and said that he did not have any notes. Witness said, "If you never took any money, why do you have no objection to me searching your premises?" The defendant said, "Go ahead." Gooch said he did not have any other money in the place. Witness searched in the shed where, between the walls near the ground, he found £1 in silver and copper. Gooch said it was a plant from his wife and it might have been there a month or more. About 2:30 on the 25th of January, the defendant came to the witness's office and said, "I brought you in the rest of the money I stole from the butter factory," and handed him a package of notes and coins totalling £32. The witness asked, "Did you steal this from the butter factory?" And he replied, "Yes. It's no use denying it. I don't know why I did it. Are you going to charge me?" And the witness replied, "There's nothing more certain." The defendant was then charged. Detective Murphy produced the notes handed to him by peers. He said he'd known the defendant for 8 years, and so far as he knew, there were no previous convictions against him. He was a married man with 3 children, and he understood he was in poor circumstances. Stanley Walter Pearce, manager of the butter factory, said he missed some money from the factory and subsequently saw Detective Murphy. Witness and Mr McMillan took the number of a £5 note and 19 £1 notes, which were put in the office safe. The money was missed on the 22nd of January. He went to defendant's place with Detective Murphy. The numbers on the notes produced in court were identical with those notes put in the safe. In electing to be dealt with summarily, the defendant said he did not wish to make any statement. He was 57 years of age. He did not know why he took the money, unless it was that he was worse of the drink. He had some drink and was despondent because of the drought. The PM said it was inexplicable that a man who had led such an exemplary life should do this. He was going to take into consideration the fact that the defendant had an exemplary character and released him on a bond. However, he wished to tell him he took a very serious view of his action. The sentences as above were then recorded. On the 29th of May 1975, it was recorded that Eileen Christina Gooch died suddenly at Deniliquin, and that she was the loving mother and mother-in-law of Joan Ward, Wilma and Max Gunn, Robin and Brian Henry, and grandmother of Gail and Kevin McMillan, Vicky and David Lovering, and Diane, and great-grandmother of Shane and Jamie. And getting back to Joan, on the 17th of September 1943, so a month after Michael's death, Joan placed a memorial notice in the paper. And it says, "On active service, Dicken, Pilot Officer Michael P. killed aircraft accident, Victoria, aged 20 years. He has made his last happy landing and has now taken off for the last and longest flight of all, ever to be remembered, inserted by Joan Gooch and June Canavan, 32 Edward Street, Deniliquin." And 3 years later, on the anniversary of his death, Dicken, in fond memory of P.O. Michael of Blue Gates, Morocco, who was killed at Mildura on the 17th of August 1943, always remembered, inserted by Joan Gooch, Deniliquin. And 2 years later, an engagement was announced of Joan Lawson, the second daughter of Mr. and Mrs. W. Gooch at Mundywall Park, Deniliquin, to Alan Norman Ward, youngest son of the late Mr. L. Ward and Mrs. Ward of Canberra. In 1949, Joan was listed as living with her parents at their property Mundywall Park and working as a clerk. And Joan married Alan Ward at St. John's Church of England in Canberra, and they had a daughter, Gail Christina. Joan divorced Alan Ward in May 1966 in Canberra. Joan Lawson Ward was recorded as living at Banner Street, O'Connor, ACT, and she was granted a decree nisi on her petition for the dissolution of her marriage to Alan Norman Ward of West Avenue, Queanbeyan, on the grounds of adultery. Joan continued to live in Canberra, and she was heavily involved in local theatre groups, particularly in the Canberra Children's Theatre, up until the late 1970s. And then she went to live at Cleveland, Queensland in 1987. On the 13th of April 1968, the engagement was announced of their daughter, Gail Christina. The engagement is announced of Gail Christina, eldest daughter of Mrs. Joan Ward of O'Connor and Mr. A. Ward of Queanbeyan, to Kevin Roy McMillan, eldest son of Mrs. Betty McMillan of Braddon and the late Mr. Roy McMillan. In later life, Joan commenced a relationship with Robert Richard Graham. He'd been previously married with 2 sons, and Joan died at Nowra, New South Wales on the 25th of May 2018 at the age of 92. So a beautiful love story which unfortunately had a tragic ending for Michael and for Joan. If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.